everybody, it's your girl Miss Trina with Chat with Trina, and today I am chatting it up with Judge Mike Engelhart, who is running for the Texas Court of Appeals. It's going to be a great show with lots of information. He's going to give us a little bit about his background, why he is qualified for the job he's running for, and what exactly is the job he's running for, and why it's important to us. So hello everybody, hello. This is Miss Trina with Chat with Trina, and I want to thank you first for making the choice to click in to Chat with Trina today, and I really appreciate all the support you guys give me. Today I am chatting with Judge. I'm gonna make sure I have say his last name right. I've been practicing. Judge Engelhart, the way it's spelled right. See there, who is the judge of the 151st Civil Court in Harris County and has served in his role for 14 years.
That's right.
Years. How are you doing today, Judge?
I couldn't be better. I'm so excited for early voting to start on Monday. And I've been campaigning for the better part of 2 years around a 10-county area to run for this new position that's different than the trial court position that I've been on. And I feel great. I feel like I've done everything I can. I'm leaving nothing to chance and leaving it all in the field, as they say. And I'm excited to let the voters have their say.
I was told I was a track star, and my coach used to always say, when you finish passing that finish line, you can't get up and do nothing. You're supposed to have given it everything you have when you finish that race. So that's all that counts.
And I'm leaving all of my energy and all of my dollars on the field.
On the field. So I know you're not busy, right? So
No. I've got all the time in the world.
So I want to thank you though for meeting with me today. I really appreciate it. It's such an honor for you to take the time out of this, I know, super busy schedule to talk with us today. So tell us a little bit about you and why, out of my curiosity, why did you decide to become a judge in the first place?
Well, a little bit about me. I am not a native Texan, but I've been here for 30 years. I'm 52 years old, and I grew up in New Jersey till I was about 18. Then I went to college in Michigan. And after all that, growing up in Jersey and in Michigan, I had plenty of winter. I decided that I would move south. And so every law school I applied to when I was 22 after college was in the south. I like to say south of I-10. And because you don't have to shovel the humidity, even no matter what. And so I've been in Texas since 92, 30 years. And I'm married almost 27 years to my wife, Eva. And we have two boys. They're 23 and 20. When I was first elected back in 2008 with President Obama, the boys were 6 and 9. And so, for most of their lives, I've been a judge. But I became a judge because for a couple of reasons. I really liked the idea of that kind of work. By that time, I had been a lawyer for 16 years, and I did a lot of, is that right? No, I'm sorry, 11 years. And I did a lot of litigation, tried a lot of cases, and handled a lot of appeals. And I just loved sort of the nuts and bolts, looking under the hood of the law and tinkering with it and figuring out why it is the way it is and where it should go in the future. And so after having tried so many cases, I was really well prepared to take on the job as a judge. And politically, I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive, and I had only ever practiced. You may be too young to remember, but in 1992, when I moved down here, the governor was Ann Richards, and she was a Democrat. Mm-hmm. And so Texas seemed like a perfectly reasonable, hospitable place with decent, Democratic leadership. But within 2 years of me moving here in 94, Republicans swept every statewide office, all the judgeships in Harris County. And so my entire law practice, I had only practiced in Harris County, at least in front of Republican judges. And they had a sort of uniform mindset about what the law should be and who should win and who should lose and how that would come about. And so in 2006, in Dallas County, the Democrats ran and swept all of the races in that county, all the judicial races in that county. And so in 2008, we decided in Harris County to follow their model. Mm-hmm. And we did. And we got a bunch of good candidates, and also me. And And we ran and we won. We swept, I'd say about 85% of the races that we ran in Harris County in that year. And we've built on that success over the last 14 years or so. And so now all but one, every elected judge in Harris County is a Democrat. There's one who was appointed by the governor because one of the judges resigned to go to a federal position.
I read about that today.
Yeah. So there is one. And then we, on the Court of Appeals, which is what I'm running for, the Democrats have the majority of those seats on the two courts of appeals that are local as well.
Will you tell us what exactly will you be doing in this role that's different than a judge? Right.
So it'll still be a judge. They'll actually give it a slightly different name. They call it a justice of the Court of Appeals, but you're still a judge. In the trial court, you see on TV and in the movies, you have the judge, me, sitting up at the front. You are sort of raised above the room, and that's symbolic. But we're sort of supposed to be above the fray and neutral. And then you have the lawyers in the middle, either sitting at tables or standing and arguing their case. And you've got jurors in the box, 12 jurors listening to the evidence in a trial. Mm-hmm. So that's exactly how you picture, just like on TV and the movies. That's the trial court. That's what I do, is handle disputes between two parties, and they end up at the end of the case. If they haven't resolved the case, they have a trial, and the jury makes a decision at the end of that case, and then that's the end of the trial case. If you have lost in that trial, what do? Let's say it's a civil case and someone sued you for $1 billion and you've lost, and you're like, oh, bleep, I've lost $1 billion. What do I do? Well, you would file an appeal to the higher court and say, hey, the jury blew it. I want a do-over. I want you Court of Appeals to take this, reverse it, and rule in my favor, or at least send it back to the trial court for a do-over, for what's called a new trial. Mm-hmm. So in the trial court, you sit as one judge, me, I make the decisions. Mm-hmm. On the Court of Appeals, you sit in a panel of 3 justices.
Okay.
And then the majority of those 3, so 2-1 or 3-0, votes on the outcome of a given case after we've studied it and reviewed it and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then the majority controls. And then if 2-1 say, yeah, jury got it wrong, judge got it wrong, or 3-0 say, yeah, judge got it wrong, jury got it wrong, they would either say, case over, we change the result to the other side, mm-hmm. or they may say, we're going to send it back for a new trial. So it's a reviewing court. Mm-hmm. It is, and it's very powerful, because in my court, in any trial court, if I make a decision, it just affects those two parties, the plaintiff and the defendant. Or if it's a criminal case, same kind of trial court. In a criminal case, you have the district attorney representing the state.
Right.
And then you've got the criminal defendant who's represented by a lawyer. And that's not where someone's suing over money. That's the government prosecuting someone who's accused of a crime. Right. And the result could be what? They could end up going to prison. But it's still a trial court, and it just affects those two parties, the state and the defendant. And in my case, it would be those two parties, the plaintiff and the defendant. It could be that somebody owes a lot of money or nothing.
Okay.
But if you go to the higher court and I make that same ruling, or I make a ruling in that case that's come up to the Court of Appeals, that could be binding on the entire state of Texas. So it's a lot more authority and responsibility, because you're writing an opinion that becomes precedent, right? It becomes the guideline or the rule for similar cases in the future.
Okay. And why did you decide to run for this position?
Good question. As I mentioned earlier, not only did I do a lot of trial work before I became a judge, but I handled a lot of appeals. I either on my own cases, because I unfortunately lost occasionally in the trial court, and I had to handle my own appeals, or I would actually get hired by other attorneys because I did a lot of appellate work, and so I would handle their appeals. So I enjoy that kind of work. I enjoy the writing and the research, and And I'm ready after 14 years as a trial judge to make that step, that next step. It's a natural progression. Why? Because as a trial judge who wants to do a good job and who wants to be efficient, I want to handle a case one time, right? I don't want it to come back to me to try again. So I'm always making decisions. I'm always thinking about what's going to happen with this decision on appeal. If I make this decision, how does it impact if this case were appealed? And so my batting average, you may have heard of somebody named Ted Williams. He was a baseball player, right? He's in the Hall of Fame because he's the last player to have a batting average of 400. That means 4 out of every 10 times he got to the plate to bat, he hit safely in his career. And that's 4 out of 10. That doesn't seem like a lot, but in baseball, it is
a lot.
Magnificent. Okay. And my batting average as a judge in the Court of Appeals is more than double that. So I get affirmed as much as anybody, or more than most, because I think like an appellate lawyer. I think like an appellate judge. I have that background and experience. And so it's a natural step to do this. I'm interested in that kind of work. When I was in law school, I was lucky enough to be an associate editor of the Law Review at the University of Houston Law Center, which is sort of the prestigious journal that you write on. And then more recently, I wrote an article or a paper. I won't bore you with the topic, but it was a legal paper that won an award from the College of the State Bar of Texas. So the State Bar of Texas is the organization that all the lawyers belong to. The College of the State Bar of Texas is not like a college like Penn State. It is the educational arm of the State Bar. And so every year people submit papers for this award, and I won that award a few years ago as the best legal article in the state of Texas. So I have the experience and background in writing and research. I would think I would be.
Well, you are intentional when you're making the decisions because of your background in appellate court and appeals.
That's right. I don't want to just make a decision because look, I really want to have a level playing field. And that before I ever ran, when I made a video in my first campaign, and I said the trial courts in Harris County are going in the wrong direction, and we need to make sure we have a level playing field so that everybody has their day in court, whether you are the little guy or you're a big corporation or insurance company. We need to have a level playing field, and I still feel that way. But at the same time, I have to balance that with there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And you can still be fair while also making sure that you're not wasting taxpayer money with having to do things twice.
Twice, exactly. I have something in common. My youngest daughter, she is, oh, and thank you for saying that I look like I might be too young to know Ann Richards. I am 53.
Really?
Love the compliment.
I swear to God, I would have thought if you had told me you were 33, I would have said, "Yep, that sounds right."
I've been endorsed by some cool people. I won't name everybody, but so far, the Houston Lawyers Association, my guy Beto O'Rourke. I had my shirt on last week saying #I'm for Beto. Houston Association of Women Attorneys and the Houston Professional Firefighters Association, Local 341. So congratulations on those endorsements. I'm sure you have more, but those are some that I just saw right away. So congratulations. So what makes you think that you're the right person? Kind of what you already said, why you're running?
Yes. And I don't like to say bad things about my opponent because she's a perfectly fine woman. So I will just say that I am. Yeah. So the firefighters endorsement means the world to me because one of the things that one of my slogans is public safety and private rights. And so from the public safety standpoint, the men and women of the firefighters union put their lives on the line, and they would not endorse somebody they thought that would not keep our community safe. And then when it comes to private rights, after the Supreme Court's decision this summer in overturning the Roe versus Wade decision, since I was 3 years old, right? That was something that was in place that 50 years we took for granted that was a battle that was won, and then women had that right to privacy, and families had the right to decide if and when they wanted to start a family. And now, and that's fairly fundamental. And I don't think too many people have strongest. Well, I mean, maybe they do, but now the law in Texas is not just you can't decide when to have family, but someone else can decide whether they're going to be the father of your baby. I mean, right? And there's nothing you could do about it. You
can be arrested for.
Yeah, doctors and the Uber driver who drove you to the clinic, or and then not only and arrested is terrible. They could also be sued for these $10,000 bounties that the legislature has put on people. So, look, as a judge, I can't tell you this is exactly how I'm going to rule because ethically, I'm not allowed to do that. These are things that I think about all the time that I feel strongly about and need to be looked at. If those cases were to come to me on the Court of Appeals, and they could, then it's something that I would take very seriously. And my opponent was, put it this way, she's never been elected to anything, and she was just appointed last year by Governor Abbott to the position that she is in. And you can imagine he's not going to appoint somebody who doesn't view the world the same way that he does.
Why this election is so important, the one that's coming up in November?
Well, so it's not just, I mean, believe it or not, people are voting right now with their absentee ballots or their mail ballots. And so if you have that mail ballot in front of you, please be sure that you're filling it out carefully. Please vote for me and vote all the way down the ballot, because every race is important, including all of the propositions at the end of the ballot. And make sure that you have filled it out properly with the last four of your social and your Texas driver's license in the spot. Put both, because if you put the wrong one and you register to vote with the other one, then your vote could be in jeopardy. Make sure you put plenty of postage on there. It could be several stamps. That it's a very big ballot in Harris County, so put enough postage on there and make sure that you send it in as soon as you are done. And I think you have to sign the flap on the back and put the right envelope inside the other envelope. So read the instructions very carefully.
Please read the instructions and read them and follow them. Follow the instructions.
You don't want your vote. You don't want to go to all the trouble of voting and have it not count. So you can do it. You can do it. It takes some concentration. So do it. But the election could not possibly be more important, because we're not just voting about whether one side or the other is better or more. I really think that we're voting about the future of democracy. We're voting about the future of voting. We're voting about the future of public schools, because the current administration wants to take money out of public schools and put them into private schools with these voucher programs, which would devastate our public school systems. And you can be sure that the U.S. Supreme Court and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals here that oversees Texas federal cases is not going to do a thing to stop such legislation. But the Court of Appeals, if that case were to come to the Court of Appeals, could do something about it. So it really does matter who is on that court. The court, we talk about the Court of Appeals as, and people think, well, if it's just car accidents, is it, breach of contract lawsuits? We make a lot of, political decisions and decisions about school issues and school funding and constitutional issues. So we call our court as a Court of Appeals, but you know what? There's a big Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C. that we call the United States Supreme Court. It is also a reviewing court, like the one that I'm running for. Of course, no one's going to put me on the U.S. Supreme Court anytime soon, but we have similar powers. And so we know that the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court is very important, because they could take things that we thought were established rights for decades and
change them.
And so courts are very powerful, and they have a direct impact on our everyday lives. So all of the rights that we take for granted, gun safety, public schools, the right to vote in the first place, the right to decide when you want to have a family, if you want to have a family, and who the father of your baby will be, are all on the ballot.
Yes. So when someone says to you, which I don't know if they'll say that to you, but if you hear of someone saying that, but what is the use of me voting for a judge? Like, Why is it still important? You know, people say that, say it doesn't matter to them. It's not going to happen to them. Why is it important?
Statistically, lots of people get involved in the legal system. There are many different types of courts, and at some point in your life, you will be involved in a court. How? All right. Well, mine is a civil trial court, right? So if you're in a traffic accident, or you want to leave your job, but you have a non-compete agreement, you could be sued over that non-compete agreement if you start working for another company. If you are a homeowner and you don't pay your mortgage, or you have a credit card and you don't pay your credit card bill, you could be sued over that debt. And you could potentially lose your house if it's the mortgage payment that you're not making. And so you want to have a judge in that instance who has been through that with you. I represented almost exclusively the little guy when I was a lawyer. I was represented plaintiffs in accident cases, in debt collection cases, in breach of contract cases. I represented small businesses. I held the hand of thousands of regular Texans going through some of the most difficult times of their lives. And so I've lived it, and I know what it's like to go through the difficult times in a lawsuit and what families actually go through. Black and brown families, Spanish speaking, English speaking. I'm fluent in Spanish, and so I fought those fights alongside many people. I'm endorsed by the union. You talked about the firefighters. That's a union.
Yes.
But a trade union that I'm endorsed by. I'm also endorsed by the AFL-CIO, which is all of the labor organizations in town, because I stand up for the little guy, and I feel strongly about that, and I identify with them. Now, let's say you're involved, God forbid, you're arrested for something. Mm-hmm. You want the judge to be able to relate to you and your background and your experience, and that not just in the trial court level, but on the Court of Appeals level too, because what happens at the end of a criminal case, if you appeal, then I'm the judge that is looking at the record, the transcript from that criminal case, and deciding whether the state has met its burden to prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, whether the sentence is appropriate, whether your bond is appropriate, all of those things, and parole issues, probation issues, any of those things could you or a loved one could get caught up in at any time in their lives. Probate. It's true, it's sad, but everybody's going to die eventually, and their loved one will. And probate is the will is a will, or even if you don't have a will, what happens to your loved one's property, house, car, money, debts when they die, and you will, you'll have to go through that process, and sometimes there's disagreements between. You can have a brother and sister fighting over their inheritance. You want to have a fair judge who's making those decisions. Juvenile kids get caught up in the legal system for felonies and misdemeanors, possession, truancy, gang affiliation, graffiti, any kinds of things, little things, dumb things, but they want to make sure they have a fair judge, and any of those things could go through the trial court and the courts of appeals. And then you got family law. You could be happily married one day and then all of a sudden decide that your wife could decide that she's had enough and want a divorce. Hopefully not, but it happens a lot. We know that. And so how do you get a divorce? In a family district court. Now, here's the other thing, why this position is important. It's not just Harris County. We kind of focus a lot on Harris County and the big city in Houston, mm-hmm. right? But I would be on the Court of Appeals that reviews cases not just from Harris County, but from a total of 10 counties. So we happen to have, for example, on the criminal side, in Harris County, we have a Democratic district attorney, Kim Ogg, who I think is a fair and decent person and makes decisions, prosecution decisions based on what's in the best interest of the community and victims, but also wants to, be a fair and compassionate person who is interested in not just retribution, but rehabilitation, and giving people another chance where possible, right? And same thing in Fort Bend County. Brian Middleton is a DA, is the district attorney, and he's a Democrat, and I think he views the world similarly. But we also have in 8 other counties in the area that who's, after those trials, 8 other counties where the district attorneys, for example, are Republicans, and may view the world a lot differently. And if there is a conviction from any one of those 8 counties, maybe they're still prosecuting small amounts of marijuana possession, or things, or minor violations, and want to seek the maximum sentence.
Right.
In Republican red counties like Brazoria or Waller, or you remember Sandra Bland, who was unfortunately died in prison or in jail in Waller County, just up the road, just up 290. Right. That's one of the counties that I'm running in, and the prosecutions and convictions, criminal matters from those counties, or civil rights cases from those counties, would be appealed to, not to some court of appeals out in Waller, but to the First Court of Appeals in Houston.
Okay.
So all of the things that could go wrong in your life, unfortunately, or things that are inevitable, like death and taxes, end up in court. And if there's an appeal of those decisions, then they would come to the court that I'm running for.
So you want a question from someone who's watching, and it says, how do we bridge the gap between the justice system and our community?
That's a good question, and something that is not a new question. I have really worked hard as a trial court judge, as someone who is, in the courtroom, I have certain authority, right? I mean, the rules and the law give me certain authority to make decisions, and my decisions are binding on people, right? But I also have this title, this cloak. I literally have a robe, and I am figuratively cloaked with this authority outside of the courtroom. People call me judge or your honor, and it's very nice and it's respectful, but what does it mean? It means that I'm a leader and a public servant. And so when I go talk to kids at high schools or elementary schools, when I talk to Boy and Girl Scout groups, when I talk to at churches and synagogues and mosques, I'm given certain respect and deference, which I treasure, and I try to not abuse, but I do try to talk to folks to help them understand the legal system and why it's important and how it affects them and why it matters, and how they can navigate it in a way that is in their best interest, so that they and their families can remain intact. So, for example, this bail bond issue that you've seen on the news, or not on the news, but also in TV commercials, because it's election time. So people are going to exaggerate. But what is bail, right? What is bail? Bail is an agreement that you are accused of a crime. You're not convicted of a crime, right? And we know that people are innocent until proven guilty under the Constitution, right? You have this presumption of innocence.
Right.
And so bail is, okay, you're accused of a crime. You've pled not guilty. So now we're going to have a trial about your guilt or innocence, right? With a judge and a jury and the lawyers arguing the case. But we're not going to do it today. We're going to do it in a couple of months or 6 months, because as a practical matter, there's only so many judges and so many courts, and there's a lot of criminal defendants waiting trial. And bail is you get to go home and go out of jail while you're waiting for your trial. And it's a promise that you will come back for trial. And if you don't come back, then you forfeit your bond and you forfeit all that money that you have posted. So it's a financial promise that you will come back for trial. That's all that it is. And in the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution requires, it's not new. It's not something that judges made up when they were elected in 2018. It is part of something that our U.S. Constitution governs all of us from the time that in the late 1780s when the Constitution was ratified. And it says that in almost every case, everybody's entitled to a reasonable bail. And that's Texas law and Texas Constitution too. And so, when we're talking about the community and community safety, people need to be aware that it's not something new that people get to go home on bail after they've been accused of a crime or even multiple crimes. It happens with Republican judges. It happens with Democratic judges. It is just the way our system works. Now, if the Constitution were to change and we took away the right to bail, maybe in some kinds of cases, and people had to remain in jail until their trial, then that would be the law. But that's not the law. The law is that in almost every case, people are entitled to reasonable bail. Now, there are exceptions.
I was just going to say that. So is there an exception? Because I go back and forth with it myself. Now, I live in the Heights, so there's a business over here that like really went hard because their place was being broken into by someone who was out on bail. However, I'm thinking about murderers, people who have, and I know they're innocent until proven guilty, but is there, when you say that you guys can make some choices and some decisions or exceptions to those rules?
It is, yes, it is a balancing test. There's a number of factors that a judge has to follow to decide whether someone's entitled to bail and then how much bail should be. So yes, in extreme cases, there is the possibility, subject to appeal to a court like mine, of whether someone is entitled to bail at all or should be denied bail. In a recent case, there was a horrific murder of, I think in the Chinese community, and somebody killed an entire family. But the judge, I think probably rightly, denied bail in that case. But that's an extreme case. And you look at things like the seriousness of the crime that they're accused of. Are they a flight risk? So this person was a foreign national, so they were you could easily have gotten on a plane and gone away and not come back for trial. The safety of the community and things like that, all of these different things that you have to weigh. And in that case, the judge probably decided that this person was a flight risk and potentially still a danger to the community, and denied them bail. And I agree with that. And if the issue were ever to come to me on the Court of Appeals of, if the DA, because this never happens, but if the district attorney were to say, to go to a court of appeals and say, the trial court judge set the bail too low, or the magistrate, who is really the one that sets bail, not even the trial court, not even the elected judge, but the magistrate set the bail too low, I would take that very seriously and look and work through the factors and decide if bail should be set higher in a given case for someone who is a real risk to the community. But let's talk about the flip side.
Okay.
Let's talk about misdemeanor cases.
Okay.
Misdemeanor cases are handled in the county criminal courts at law, the lower level court, criminal courts, and those are generally nonviolent, low-level offenses. And forever in Harris County, there was a cash bail system in those cases where people had to come up with $5,000 or $10,000 to be able to get out of jail. Now, our jail was completely jammed full, and if someone who's accused of a small amount of possession or a nonviolent low-level crime could end up spending months in jail waiting for trial because they didn't have $5,000 or $10,000 to get out on bail. And so a Republican federal judge a few years ago ruled that system was unconstitutional. Why? Why was it unconstitutional? Because if you got two people, one of them has some money and one doesn't, and they're accused of exactly the same crime, the person with money gets to go home.
Right.
Post a bond and go home. The person with no money sits in jail for 6 months. Now, what's the effect of sitting in jail for 6 months waiting for trial? You lose your job. You lose your, if you're in school, you lose your education, you have to start over. You could lose your family to divorce, or, if your kids are orphaned because you're in jail, they could be in the state custody. Yeah. And so people's lives were being ruined over really low-level offenses, and they weren't even convicted yet.
Yeah.
So the court said that's unconstitutional, and now we have, largely for nonviolent, low-level offenses, we have a non-cash bail system. So people will sign on the dotted line and say, "I promise to come back," and it's working. It's working. People are able to go back to their jobs and their families and their lives and being productive members of society and not a drain on the. It's so expensive to keep somebody in jail. It's more than the cost of college tuition. It's hundreds of dollars every day to keep someone in jail and keep them fed and keep the guards there and keep the facility working and all that. So it's a win-win all around, and it's working really well. One last point. Mm-hmm. Who is funding all of these crime commercials? It is the bail bond companies. Why? After that change in the law, when the Republican federal judge said no cash bail for most violations, the bail bond companies were losing money because people weren't going to a bail bond company to get a bond. They were just signing on the dotted line. So all these $5,000 and $10,000 cases that were the bread and butter of the bail bond companies went away. So they're hemorrhaging money. They're losing money. So what do? On felony cases, big violent cases or serious crimes, where the bond could be $500,000, $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million. They used to charge a full 10% as the premium. 10%. 10% of $1 million is $100,000. So a criminal defendant would have to come up with $100,000 just to go home. Well, they don't have it. So bail bond companies, because they're losing money so fast, they said, okay, instead of 10%, we're going to go down to 1%. So instead of paying $100,000 to get out on $1 million bond, we're only going to charge you $10,000. So in a serious crime, do you want to spend time in jail or do you want to go home? And some of these guys have backers, they have pimps, they have cartels, they have gangs, whatever they have, family members, then they come up with $10,000 and they go home and they're out on bail because the bail bond companies, instead of charging the usual 10%, are only charging 1%. So there's plenty of blame to go around, and part of it is a financial issue.
Definitely.
And so, when we talk about bridging the gap between the judicial system and the community, none of these judges down at the courthouse take public safety lightly. Do you remember in 18, the people who was elected? It was a lot of African-American women judges. Do you remember the whole Black Girl Magic thing? Mm-hmm. They were elected because they reflected their community. The third ward, the fifth ward, the TSU, all of those things, alphas and kappa and alpha kappa alphas and deltas were elected to the bench. And I presided over a lot of their swearing in ceremonies. And it was wonderful because it was joyous because they had broken through into the glass ceiling of getting elected to these important positions. And I assure you, every single one of them takes public safety very seriously. They are not being frivolous about it. They are not trying to let people out. But Texas law is Texas law. The federal Constitution is the federal Constitution. And most people are entitled to bail, reasonable bail, in almost every case. It's a long ballot. It's one of the longest in the country. But at the end of the ballot, there's a couple of really important things. There is our county judge, Lena Hidalgo, who is my friend, who I believe has done an excellent job for our community, guiding us through the COVID crisis. And really focused on improving our flood infrastructure. And there are certain wealthy builders and bail bondsmen who are fighting tooth and nail to lie about her record. And she's way at the end. So she needs.
I'm sorry. It was just so obvious when it came on. I was like, she hasn't been convicted, but okay. I mean, indicted. So, but okay.
Yeah, I know. I mean, look, the truth goes out the window 3 weeks before an election. So so she's at the end of the ballot. Also, you have a bunch of propositions about certain bonds and things that I think are very important that people should study and try and vote all the way down. What happens, sadly, is every cycle, if you look at the undervote. So the expression, if your vote were not important, they wouldn't be fighting so hard to take it away from you.
Yeah.
So, but don't take it away from yourself either. If you're in the ballot box, if you're in the ballot booth and you're voting, don't go home because the ballot is too long. Vote to the bottom, because what happens if you don't go vote for that county criminal court at law judge, like, for example, Genesis Draper, who I think is magnificent, and she's part of this Black Girl Magic thing. She's way down at the bottom of the ballot. She's a county criminal court at law judge and gets rave reviews from the bar and works really hard and does a good job and keeps us safe. If you don't vote for her because you didn't bother to get to the bottom of the ballot, and then that's essentially a vote for her opponent. Or if somebody else goes in and votes for her opponent, that's 2 votes essentially, because it's a vote she would have had that you took away, and also a vote for the other side. So do not skip the bottom of the ballot. Even if you got to take a rest and walk around in a circle, bring some water, bring an apple, and have a snack. You've got to we always complain about voter suppression.
Right.
But we also do it to ourselves because we don't finish voting to the bottom of the ballot, and then you're silenced and you're giving an extra vote to the other side unnecessarily.
And you've stood in the line already.
Right. I mean, look, when they took straight ticket voting away, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
And that's what I meant to say for those who I started in the middle of that. There's no straight ticket voting anymore. So that's why it's important that you go all the way down and vote all the way down.
That's right.
It won't take you that long. You'll be fine.
There's voting on the weekend. There's Saturday and Sunday of early voting. You could go on the weekend. They're open from 7 to 7. You could go before work. You could go after work. You could go at lunch. There's a zillion early voting in-person locations. You could vote anywhere in the county. You don't have to vote near your house. If you could live in
that can be provided if you call.
That's right. Yep.
Harris Votes or something.
Harrisvotes.com. And you can, and a number of services like rideshare services are offering rides to the polls, free rides to the polls as well. But if you live in Pasadena, but you work in Katy, you can vote in Katy. It's Harris County, but if you live in Crosby, but you work in South Houston, you can vote down there. It's and during early voting, not on election.
Right.
So I encourage people to vote early. Monday, a week, or not even a week, just Monday, the 24th is the first day of early voting.
What's going to happen on election? You just never know. So you might as well just get it done.
Yeah, right. You could have a medical emergency, God forbid. We could have horrible weather, anything.
Yeah. Last words?
You make it seem like I'm being executed, but last words for our interview? Yes.
Any last words to our viewers regarding voting, you running? Yes. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yes, here are the last words for this interview about this election with Trina. As I said before, it really matters who sits on these courts, and you want to have someone who can view the world in an empathetic way, and in a way that matches with your values. And I believe that I come much closer to that than my opponent. For example, there's something called the Houston Lawyers Association. Trina, earlier you mentioned in my endorsements that I'm endorsed by something called the Houston Lawyers Association. Are you familiar with that group?
I'm not.
So the Houston Lawyers Association is a very important civil rights group. It is not the Houston Bar Association, okay, which is all the lawyers in Houston. It is the African American Lawyers Group and organization. Why is there a separate one? Because in the 1950s, and when lawyers were graduating law school, Black lawyers were graduating law school and coming to Houston, they could not join the Houston Bar Association at all. They were not permitted to join the Houston Bar Association. So men and women got together and created their own bar association, the Houston Lawyers Association.
Okay.
Now that is a group that is still going on strong in Houston. You still have to be, now, of course, everybody can join the Houston Bar Association and be a lawyer in Texas, as long as you go to law school and pass the bar and all that. But that group's still around and advocates for equality and fairness and for the benefit of young African American lawyers and law students, so that they make sure that they have equal opportunities, and advocating for their rights, and a place for them to be a part of a group an affinity group where they can discuss legal issues of the day and solve problems, and also raise money for charity and all of that. So it's a very important group that and they endorse in contested judicial races. They screen candidates, you interview with them, and they endorse candidates in judicial races. Now, I've always sought and I've always gotten their endorsement every time that I've been on the ballot in primaries and general elections. So that's about 10 different times. And I, in this election, asked for their endorsement. I went and interviewed with them, and they gave me their endorsement. But my opponent did not even go to them to ask for their endorsement at all. And to me, that is very disrespectful of a very important group and speaks volumes about how she views the Black and brown community in the Houston area, and is emblematic of the differences between us in terms of the importance that I place on members of minority communities, Black, brown, Asian, and everything else. I think we're all equal. We're all in this together, and we need to treat each other with love and respect and tolerance and dignity. And that's why I would never pass up the opportunity to ask for the support and endorsement of a group like that.
Awesome. Oh, I learned something. I learned so much today. Thank you, Judge.
Well, that's what I do. That's what I do when I go talk to people. I try to tell them things that they didn't know.
Definitely. And that is what my platform is. You'd asked me earlier about my background. I have a real job, but I love this. I learned from I chatted with Boris Miles, and I was saying using the word politicians. So he got me straight really quickly. So I know to say, I know that you guys are public servants. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I am a small platform, but like I told you, it's a powerful platform. And this is my part of sharing getting the information out about voting and why it's so important, and then what you do, because some of us, don't know what these positions are. So I thank you for being patient and breaking it all the way down so we can know what you're running for.
You're quite welcome. It was really a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. If there's ever anything you need from me, knocking on the door, I'm always down. So just reach out. Roger's on. I want to say, Roger, thank you so much for the connection. I really appreciate you for seeing me and thinking I would be up for this opportunity. So thank you both very much. And you guys have a good evening and good luck.
Thank you. Don't forget to vote all the way down the ballot. Look for me, Judge Mike Engelhart, Mike Engelhart, Mike Engelhart.
There you go. Bye. Good night. And thank you so much. Tell Eva bye.
I will.
Okay.
No, that's right. You got it. Eva, you got it.
So, all righty. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Judge Engelhart, for taking the time out of your super busy schedule to chat with Trina today, especially during this super important time in our state. Thank you for the patient way that you broke down what the position is that you're running for, why is it important to us, and then why it's so important for us to vote in this election and scroll all the way down to the end of the ballot. Thank you again. Guys, make sure you go to youtube.com/chatwithtrina, subscribe, then hit the little bell so you can be notified when I upload a new video.